Hello, everybody. Joe the Lawyer here, and welcome to another episode of Analog Man Cave. All right, guys, thank you. I took the day off yesterday. Just needed one day, every once in a while, so I didn't do a video. Need a little break. But today we're back into the grind here, guys, and we're talking about history, especially the last couple hundred years. So we talked about the old stuff already, all the myths and legends, and we talked about how geography shapes things from the earliest stages of development of your game world. It determines where things appear and how things are laid out and what civilizations appear in certain places and why, right? But so now, at this point, you should probably have a world map in front of you, all right, with various geographic regions, swamps, deserts, and this and that. And you're filling in the blanks with countries, cities, towns, and villages. You're showing what it looks like today, okay? Using all those geographical landforms and whatnot and everything there. So once you get all that set up and you have a rough idea of the character of the people that inhabit these lands due to all those myths and legends, it's time to start figuring out what's been going on recently. And by recently, I mean what happened in the last 200 to 300 years. You see, this is a weird thing, I guess. You're probably thinking, wait a minute, we jump from mythology and ancient history and geography and nomads and whatnot and hunter-gatherers and early civilization to, what, the last 300 years? Yeah, that's what I do. I write up the really old stuff first, then I jump ahead hundreds or even thousands of years, all right, and write up the last couple hundred years worth of world history. Everything else you could fill in as you go. You could fill in the big gap in time. It's not necessary for you to know that as a GM at this point. It can be an ongoing work and fun ongoing work too. You're writing the history of your world, right? But what matters the most is the last few hundred years. I mean, look at it in terms of the last few hundred years in our world. You need to know the last 200 or 300 years to understand where we are now and how we got that way. You don't necessarily have to understand what happened in the Dark Ages, though, to understand where we are now and how we got that way, right? Things that happened then, they affected, the next 300 years of their era. There seems to be like 200 to 300 year gaps in time where everything that you're dealing with right now is dictated by the last few hundred years. So that's why I figured this is the time frame we're going to use, okay? Now, it's not as daunting a task as it first appears. You don't need to have every event of every day that happened everywhere all detailed out. You just need the things that affect history on a broad scale. And broadly speaking, there are a lot of things that happen in the world. So I'm just going to go bullet point by bullet point here and talk about the things that may have affected your world in some way and how it might have, how it might have affected it. Okay, and you could use some or all of these if you want to in developing your last couple hundred years. All right. So first, the big one, war. War can disrupt every aspect of society. The results of wars can be famine, economic collapse, enslavement, disease, you name it, and war can cause it. And don't forget population collapse. War may drive your population so low it cannot recover for generations. Next, natural disasters. At the time I'm writing this, there has just been a bunch of huge wildfires in California destroying much of LA County, and that's minor. All right, on the grand scale, if the supervolcano under Yellowstone ever erupted, we're all fucked. Okay, the U.S. is going to be covered with inches of ash. Goodbye crops, and the skies will be filled as well, and another ice age might happen. The hurricane can come by and wipe out a seaport city. Locusts can emerge from their 3,000-year hibernation and wipe out all the crops and people of the 3-foot-tall locusts. All right. Rebellions and revolutions. Look what happened in 1776 and everything that stemmed from that. The U.S. Civil War, in terms of rebellion, also had far-reaching effects. Technological advancements. Look at the effect the printing press had and gunpowder had on the world. There could also be advances in mining technology or shipbuilding, which gives one people an advantage over some others. Religious events and schisms are huge for motivating a society or for destabilizing one. In an RPG campaign, the gods themselves have a more direct influence than they do in our regular lives here. For example, you don't have to take their power on faith because the priest could just, waved his hand over your head and cured your herpes or whatever it is that you might have, so it's more personal to the people if you cure their herpes. They'd be more willing to fight and die for every religion the more real it is to them, and it makes it more real and more personal the more of a direct effect it has on them. Going to war for herpes cures. Yeah, there we go. Marital alliances are an old and ancient way to keep the peace by cementing the family bonds between countries and cities. You're much more reluctant to destroy the country your grandkids are going to end up ruling. It's better for trade relations too. Okay, and this goes hand in hand with diplomatic agreements. Maybe two cities decide to jointly control the mountain pass they've been fighting over for 500 years, and they share the tolls and that they collect equally. Maybe you agree to allow some sort of a Silk Road to pass through your lands and you benefit because of that. Okay. Perhaps several countries that have been fighting forever are just tired of the fighting and wasting resources, and cooler heads prevail, and they decide to set up some form of a, 5-country United Nations to handle things amongst themselves. And that could lead to further alliances later on. Okay. New trade routes or new resources could be discovered. Maybe the copper miners came across a rich vein of gold or iron or some gem or whatever. Or maybe the fish people, the sea elves or whatever under the sea near a seaport want to trade pearls for steel weapons. Perfect, good deal, right? They can't forge steel underwater. Maybe an earthquake opened up a way across otherwise impassable mountains, and now you have a trade route that you don't have to go, basically the equivalent of sailing all around the Horn of Africa or something like that. You could cut across the Suez Canal, right? Maybe that'll save a bit of time and money. All these things affect a country in large ways and can change the course of their history. Their destiny changes. Deaths and assassinations cause upheavals on every front. Long-reigning Elven king dies. His reign lasted 1,200 years, and the force of his personality single-handedly kept the peace amongst several groups of people. His heirs are all idiots and useless. Then what happens? Or the king of some land is assassinated. Who did it? Will wars start because of it? Did the country everybody thought was behind it actually do it, or was it like a false flag kind of a thing? All right, next, plagues. Black Death, beer bug, anyone? I think enough said on that, and we all know the effects of dealing with plagues firsthand. Cultural shifts can occur. Maybe some outside influences all converge in a city or a country, and all of a sudden new cultural norms arise. That sometimes the new old cultural norms can be like resurrected and overthrow the current norms. That's usually some sort of reversion to a more conservative golden age type time before so-and-so happened or these people came in or whatever the hell it is, right? Speaking of people coming in, migration and population movements can be caused by many things. The Irish potato famine caused a huge flux of the Irish to the U.S. Wars in the Mideast caused huge population movements to Europe, with all the cultural disruption that you're seeing there in Europe now. Economic crisis is a very real thing. Bubbles pop and bring down everything with them. I think the first one was a tulip crash in 1600s. It bankrupted tons of people. It was a big bubble. Maybe a big trade armada was lost at sea with the reluctant loss of all the investment, or it was taken by another country for their economic gain, and now they have the advantage. Social reforms can come about when regular people of a country who do all the work and keep everything humming along just feel like, damn it, I've had enough. When the bread and circuses just aren't enough, they'll start to demand more. And if they don't get it, they'll riot. So they need to be appeased. Reforms are made, a new norm sets in. Philosophical movements can change things up. Combine a great philosophical idea or set of ideas with the right time and the right place for it, and societies can be completely changed by them. Look what happened when Europe rediscovered all the Greek classics, the Renaissance, right? The Enlightenment very directly led to the founding of the U.S. All our founding documents come from that. Existentialism influenced many of the modern art movements of the last 100 years. What happens when a family's line dies out? The ruling family, who takes over then? Is there a civil war? There's definitely going to be a crisis. That's going to affect everything from trade to diplomatic relations to culture, depending on who gets into office. And that leads us finally to a big one, is political maneuvering, both internal and external, including spying. Spying on your citizens, spying on the rest of the world. Now, this looks like, on its surface, a minutia thing, like a day-to-day thing. And while it does affect day-to-day stuff, there are peaks and valleys, and with political maneuvering, that could lead to huge changes that can be felt for decades or more. Political parties rise and fall, for example. Powerful people can emerge to run things behind the scenes for years or even generations. You can have a spy implanted in the enemy household for decades, learning everything about them, which leads to huge advantages over them in every way. Client states and colonization can emerge, or large empires, colonies can all collapse, like Great Britain after World War II. So these are just, I think of it like 17 or 18 different things here. They're all factors that you can use to develop the last 100 years of history of your campaign world. Pick a country, roll a D6 or D17 or D18, whatever, 3D6 something. Figure out which things may have affected it, and then just start writing about it, right? That's it. Do something along those lines, and then tie it all together in this big web. Okay, because 3, 4 countries over here, and you know what's going on there. All right, maybe there's a famine. Therefore, the people of one country went to the south and went to the other country. Now you know one of the factors that happened to the other country. Famine influenced migration, right? So starting with that point, what happens then? You see, it's like balls on a pool table. Everything affects everything else. Once you put a bunch of balls into motion, it seems chaotic, but there is physics behind it. You can predict what will happen, what balls will move, how they're going to affect all the other balls on the table, if you have that sort of a mindset for it. So it's just a matter of looking at these sorts of things and coming up with a mindset. And by the way, guys, if I missed anything, please let me know, because I'm always looking for more topics like this, because I think these are important, not just for understanding our game world, but our own world too. The more you understand, the better off you are, and the more you understand these things in your own world, in the real world, you can apply it to the game world, your campaign world. So that's why I think it's important to actually learn and study all these types of topics and how and going back into history and how it affected everything. But anyway, here's our thing of the day. Started out with the quote for the algorithm, but it's really just emerging or evolving into something where I just say, here, comment on this or answer this question or whatever the case may be. So I was thinking about today, who would win in a fight, Schwarzenegger's Conan or the Kurgan from the Highlander? All right. Now, assuming Conan would do the finishing move, cutting his head off, so it's not going to be, the Kurgan would win because of constant regeneration shit. Assuming Conan's going to take his head because that's Conan, that's his style, right? So, in a flat-out brawl, all right, Conan's got his big-ass sword, Kurgan's got his big-ass sword. Who would win in a fight and why? All right, how would it go down? So, I'm curious what you think. And again, don't quote the Kurgan's regeneration power. Let's assume Conan takes his head, okay? And he doesn't know what the fuck happens. All that fucking energy shoots out. But who would win? All right, guys, let me know. And next coming up, tomorrow's video is classes of your campaign world by region, by race, and how they all interact with the world on a larger scale, like about rulership, politics, economics, war, and all that kind of stuff. All right? So thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate it. And I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.